Okay, recording is on now, so anytime that you want to start.
We should probably do the greeting if I can get through
Yeah,
it.
we'll get through the greeting. I'm just going ahead and start recording this, so.
All right, here we go.
You're listening to the Epic Universe Podcast. For more information on the Epic series of novels, visit www.epicuniverse.com. Loading personality: Stephanie Police. Derek Collins. Initiating podcast.
Hey everybody, welcome to another Epic Universe podcast. I just finished The Glorious Becoming. Just finished it like 5 minutes ago, and I don't even know what to do with myself. I'm so excited.
Warning: you are now entering a spoiler zone. Do not proceed until properly briefed.
I feel like my adrenaline is still going, like my heart rate is like through the roof. It is the best installment of Epic yet, and I hate him so much for the ending. I want to pick up the fifth book and it's not done yet.
Yes, if you have not read The Glorious Becoming, you do not need to listen to this podcast.
Oh, yes. Yeah. If you have not finished it or anything, please just hang up now. Don't
Because
listen to the rest of it.
there will definitely be spoilers, many spoilers. This podcast is going to be a reaction podcast, a reaction to finishing the book. Stephanie just finished it. She told you how she felt. I didn't just finish it, but I felt very similar when I did. My jaw dropped. I could
Right.
not believe
Right.
what I had just read.
Right.
And, and I will agree with her. This is the best book in the series.
I hate him so much for that cliffhanger, though. I'm so mad at him.
Honestly, Lee is going to have a hard task ahead to write a better book than this.
He outdid himself. He really, really did.
This is an amazing book. It's a book that's different than the other ones. And when you read it, or if you've read it, you'll know what I'm talking about.
He develops the character so differently. Like you see different perspectives for each character. And I'm gonna throw out there. You see Scott do a lot of not Scott-like things, and it's, oh my gosh.
Well, there's more dialogue in this book, and I thought the dialogue in this book was the best yet.
Absolutely. Okay. Let's try. I know we're both excited, but let's try and do like some type of organized.
That's
Let's
going
start
to
at
be
the
difficult.
beginning. Let's start at the beginning, and we'll work our way through it. So, how about that? How about we do that?
We'll give it a try. I feel like there's going to be some jumping around because of the excitement, but that's entirely fine. We could talk about this book for hours upon hours.
Right. I think that we may do that. However, I think
not in one sitting.
Right. He's gonna have to cut this down. So how about this? Just because I'm sure that Lee's gonna want this podcast to go on for a while about our reactions to this, because there are so many different things that we can talk about. How about we try and do it in some type of organized fashion and start from the beginning and work our way through. So if people who have read it to a certain point still want to listen to it, they can listen to it in sections as they get through the book.
We can try to do that.
Okay.
We'll see how that goes.
All right.
I thought from the beginning of this book, chapter 0, we get a glimpse.
Brilliant.
We get a glimpse of what's coming in the book, and that is we begin to see things not from a human perspective, but from an alien perspective.
And Lee, I have to say it was genius the way that he did it, because I when I was reading it, I didn't get it at first. until they started until like about like a few paragraphs in. I was like, this doesn't sound like, you know, like what I've read before about like, the journeys in the spaceships. This is something different. And then boom, it
Right.
hits you like you're reading this from the perspective of of a Golothok. It's, oh my gosh.
Or when you get to Wutil,
Yeah.
you get his perspective, and the brilliance in that is that these aliens become real. They become real to you. They're not just a bunch of bad guys. Actually, it really kind of blurs the question, who is the bad guy here?
It does.
Doesn't it depend on what your perspective is?
It does. It takes that which actually it's not even what Lee establishes, because he doesn't really ever come out and like pinpoint the difference between enemy and like who's the enemy and who's the good guys. You just kind of piece that together on your own by reading the first four. Like it's like, in your head, the aliens attacked Earth, clear cut enemies, the humans and the Eden Command and the Nightmen, they're the good guys. But in this one, it takes that preconceived notion that you have, and it scribbles it out.
Yeah.
To see the war from an alien's perspective, they're not the enemy. They're subservient.
The Bachma. Speaking of the Bachma, right?
Yeah.
Predominantly the Bachma. Yeah. The Bachma, I think, as Lee has described in many of it, in the other books, that they're a lot like the humans.
They're very, 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 very similar.
I mean, can you sort of put yourself in Tothan's position? Can you put yourself in Wutil's position? Can you kind of relate to those characters and maybe why they do the things that they do now? I think by the end of this book you can, and that's what is so great. It's that we read the first 3 books, we look at the Bachma as enemies, but by the end of the Glorious Becoming, you can relate to the ones that you would consider your enemies, and you kind of say, wait a minute, maybe they're not as bad as I thought they were. They have
Right.
their own motives, and genuinely, if you put yourself in their shoes, you can understand their characters. You can understand. It's so much. It's so much more than black and white here.
It is. There's so many shades of gray. Like you start to identify with the characters, and just to split them up, just looking at the Bachma just on their own, like how Tothan reacts with Sfera. And it's like they're establishing friendships in these relationships, and it's to the point where you don't see them as aliens. They're almost like comrades in arms, because everybody's I can't even string my words together. I'm so excited about this. Everything is just that you thought about, it's just turned upside down, because you find out so much about what drives them and what's pushing them to have to do what they do, that you almost feel sorry for them to a certain point.
Absolutely.
Like it pulls at your heartstrings to the point where you're just like, okay, I get it. That sucks. Like, I would not want to be put in that position. And just it completely changes your perspective on the entire war. And then with the Golothok, as just what that interaction between Centurion and Esther at the end, it sounds like they, as much of brutes as they are, they obviously have driving purposes behind what they do. Like when Centurion was given the task to, deliver that message, like that was his driving force. So it's just like what drives them, it's what drives humans too.
Right. They become real. They're not just an alien species anymore.
No.
That's what is so brilliant. That's what makes a good story. Relating to the characters, having real characters.
It's mind blowing to
It is.
view it from an alien's perspective. It really is, because it's not just one dimensional anymore.
It's very far from one dimensional.
Right. It's like being presented two sides of an argument and you have to pick which one. And at this point, I mean, you're stuck in the middle.
Yeah, you begin to see this is a very transitioning book. It's the fourth book out of 8, probably 8, and it's not a surprise that we would transition, but the transition that was made, it is mind blowing. There's so much that you want to say, but you don't even know how to say it. I mean, is that kind of how you feel? There's so much you could talk about, but in a way you're speechless at what you've just read.
Right. There's so much to talk about, but I mean that's just the problem. Like, there's so much to talk about that you can't even focus on one thing. Like with the Bachma and the Golothok, like you could take off running in any direction. Like, I am still wondering what the heck happened to Sveta.
Yeah.
He does it, like, after she's gone, like, he doesn't go back to that, and it's driving me crazy. Like the sincerity and the caring and the, he's not going to leave her, like, from an alien, like, from coming from what you thought was a thoughtless, heartless, mindless killing machine, to not let Sveta stay in the possession of Oleg because he knew that something bad was going to happen to her. Like, it takes the aliens down from the villain down to, you're kind of glad that just happened.
Yeah, it's a real war. It's a real war, and it depends on your perspective who the good guys are. Just like in any war.
It's almost. Go ahead. Sorry.
Each side has its own motives and reasons. Okay, let's look at the Kaladi. Are they the bad guys? From our perspective, they are. But what about to their own perspective? They're worshiping their god. They're very religious. Are they doing what they think is right? Absolutely. Can you understand that?
Since you went there, I just would like to point out that one of my favorite parts in this book is that conversation between Sveta and Tathan.
Oh, it's a dilemma though. But it is very thought-provoking, which is another thing about this series, but particularly this book. It causes you to think and ask questions, and it maybe causes you to ask questions that you don't necessarily have an answer to, that maybe there's not anybody that can really give you an answer to it. But it's more than what you just read on the page. There's so many levels of deepness with this book, and any good book is going to make you think when you put that book down, or even before you're done reading it. You're thinking about things in life, things that relate to your life, and what are the answers to those questions? Like that conversation with Sveta and Tathan, that's a real question that people have. I'm talking about religion,
yes,
or God. That's people ask those questions today in our lifetime, and they are real and serious questions. And when you're reading that, if you're a Christian, maybe it makes you uncomfortable, but it's real and it's true. And Lee does not shy away from that in these books. He does not do that. And that's one thing that's great about it, because it's honest. And if it's not honest, it's not real. If it's not real, you can't relate to it. And so we have this alien war, and we have all these things going on, and we have we see a lot of that, in the science fiction realm. But how many stories can you actually put yourself into the middle of it and relate with the characters? How many stories can you actually relate to an alien species? I can't think of any that I've seen that I can really relate to a Tothan, or even the Jubajon, the female Athene, which
I still can't pronounce that correctly. So
when I got there, I think we should just call Jubajai Stephanie. That's easier. I thought that was perfect when I got there. It's a female Athene. That was great. I liked it.
I feel I know that this probably is not even close to why he stuck the female Athene in there, but I feel like you keeping calling me an Athene may have been a driving force behind him making that one.
It's subliminal, subliminal.
Jerk. All right. Okay. I'm gonna back this up. we got a little deep there. We got a little deep. So in a complete, turnaround on the subject, I laughed so hard at the beginning where the monster sank his teeth into Wuteel, and it was Flopper.
Yeah.
I laughed so hard. I have to be honest, Lee, I reread that part just because it was really funny.
Well, that's a great part of the book, is that we see things from these other perspectives, and it makes you kind of think back over the course of the other books and how the Kenrasis are described and how the Necrolid are described, and you think for a moment, if this series was written by an alien, say a Bagma,
the dog is a monster.
The dog would be this venomous monster, and that's how we look at the Necrolid, and that's how we look at the Kenrasi, but that's not how they look at them. Well, maybe the Bagma look at the Necrolid, but the Golothok don't, and so it's another way that black and white gets kind of blurry. You see things from a different perspective, but it becomes more real, and you start to relate or understand these alien species more than you ever would have, because you're getting a glimpse inside their mind. It's brilliant. It's great. It adds more to what was already there. I mean, it's great. It's great. I love it.
It is. It really is. One of the things that I did is as I reached certain parts in the book, there were just things where I had to just stop and reach out to Lee about, because I couldn't contain myself. One of the things, I'm very glad that it got resolved, but I literally had to set the book down and walk away because I got so angry. I hate Victor. I hate him. I hate him so much. And it got amplified by what he was doing, about what we found out what he was doing to Varya.
Yeah.
I don't even know how to describe how angry I got. I am so glad that Dostoevsky handed his butt to him on a platter. But just that part, oh man, it rocked me to the core. That just
And you see things from a woman's perspective, which we've discussed before. You see things a little bit differently than guys do, so you're probably a little bit more sensitive to those types of things.
You can't tell me that when you read that you didn't get angry.
Oh yeah, absolutely, but probably not as sensitive to it as you. I probably keyed more in on Dostoevsky's reaction, which we haven't seen. No. We haven't seen really a side of him like that since his conversion.
Right. As soon as I read it about what Victor was doing, I knew that somebody was going to inevitably end up finding out. And I am so glad that it was Dostoevsky because he handed out penance in a way that wasn't going to humiliate her, but he put his foot down. And I am hoping that that will be the last we see of Victor, but I don't know if it is.
I seem to think that somewhere along the line we'll see him again, just because it's left out there for that possibility.
Right.
There is so much in this book that we can talk about, and we're going to end up talking about, very many of these things that we can talk about. I was when I finished this book, I was just basking in the awe of what I had just read. I've read. I'm not a person that reads a whole lot of fiction. I've read fiction. I do read some fiction here and there. I remember reading some classic works when I was in school, and the work that came to my mind, which I compare this to, and I have my own personal reasons for, and I'll explain that, is Great Expectations. And I don't know if anybody's out there has read that.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Charles Dickens, Great Expectations.
Yes, no, I've never read it.
I loved that book. I love that book because you're told some things at the beginning of the book, and by the end of the book, things start coming together. They start getting pieced together that you were told from the beginning, but you didn't realize it. But what was so great about that book, it kept your attention. It kept you wanting to read more. And there were just times when I had to sit the book down and just could not believe what I was reading.
Like when, oh God, like when oh God, I'm gonna use my words now. Falcon Platoon.
Yeah.
I can't believe that they went that far, that Archer went that far.
Yeah.
That is, I mean, that is cut and dry treason. That is beyond
evil.
That is beyond evil. That is beyond evil. That is monstrous. That is the lowest form of low possible.
And that was hinted. That was hinted at in Hero. We just didn't know it at the time because
it was hinted at that he was going to do something drastic. But I mean, that was drastic.
Yeah, Archer has a conversation.
Strom Farber.
Remember in Hero when Archer says he has to speak with Farber and Hutchin, and Farber didn't want his son on the front line.
Yeah.
So he had to have a conversation with Hutchin too, and Hutchin's a weasel. Yeah, but we have business. It was hinted at that Farber would be going to Falcon Platoon there. It wasn't outright stated, but it was. But now you can go back and see that's what the intention was all along.
And it's so. I didn't quite understand it at first why he was building the Falcon Platoon back up so much, why he was getting the level of depth in with those characters and you really get to know them and you're reintroduced to Wylan and Tacker. And then now legitimately Scott's future and the 14th's future rest in the hands of that small group of operatives that survived that assault in Chernobyl, or Kravs. I can't pronounce it. The one that starts with the letter K.
Was it Krasnoyarsk?
That one. Krasnoyarsk. Krasnoyarsk. Anyway, their entire future now rests on them and a very large injured Golothok and an untrustworthy Athene. Like the entire war and now their entire well-being and their future rests on this handful of operatives that can attest the fact that Novosibirsk didn't shoot them down. I don't know how they're going to be able to swing this.
Right. I think one of the greatest parts of the book is the conversation that Lylan and Tacker have right before they take off. Because when Tacker is shot down and they all die, you stop and you think about that conversation that he just got back together with his girlfriend.
Yeah.
And you care. And
And-
you really care about what just happened to Tacker. And you go back, and that was unbelievable the way he did that. It was
Like,
brilliant
your heart
writing.
breaks. Your heart breaks for that.
It does.
It's
You-
devastating.
You remind yourself that this is not real. And you have to remind yourself that these people are not real because you care about these people. You care about what happens to them.
It's such an emotional roller coaster, like that part, and I like shouted at, like, I'm like shouting at like the pages in my book to like get the reaction that I wanted, and nothing happened between Scott and Sveta before he left. Nothing happened.
And it
Oh, it killed me.
It-
It killed me.
this is a very emotional book.
Oh
You
God,
are-
it
you-
killed me.
You are drawn into the story more than I think any other book. You are drawn into what's happening. This is a very well, the book itself, I touched on that it was different. There's not a lot of action in the book. Most of the book. And
You see, I beg to differ.
well, I mean,
Towards the end of the book, that's all, like, your adrenaline is pumping. Like you feel like you're Esther in that little black dress. You feel like you're Natalie. You feel like you're Dostoevsky. Like your heart's pumping, your adrenaline's pounding, and like in your head, you're trying to get to the pariah. You're trying to find Sveta. You're trying to do all of these things. Like, and it's a whirlwind of action going on in your head, and you want all of them to succeed, and you're pushing, and you're rooting for them, and you're wishing and hoping that that's what's going to happen. But in the bottom of the pit of your stomach, it's not.
well,
And you
let me
just get
clarify
so
what I mean.
frustrated.
By action, when I say this book is different because there's not as much action, let me clarify that. In the other books, the style of the book, you would have dialogue, you would have missions within the book, smaller missions going on here and there. There would be a call, they would go out on a mission. Much of this book is not like that, actually like that. There's not, there is a couple here, but not as many. It's not as much maybe I should say military action until you get up to the end. And when I'm reading this and I'm noticing, I'm like, wait a minute, they're not doing a whole lot of actually fighting in this book. You kind of get the feeling that the end of this book is going to be huge.
And it was.
And it was. And the way that Lee was able to tie everything together and for it, the perfect storm, maybe the best way I could describe what comes to pass at the end of this book. Unbelievable. It's the best yet. I mean, Lee took this series to a whole nother level. And he went to places where I would have never imagined he went. But
Also, I would just like to point out, one of my predictions totally came true. Totally came true. Boom shakalaka. Boom. I told you there was going to be something huge that happened between Sveta and Scott. Told you. Told you.
Well, while
win.
you're on that, one of my predictions totally came true at the end of the book, which is Malcolm Blake becomes president.
Well,
and
yeah.
Totally reading Max and Oleg and thinking, oh my gosh,
Right?
oh my gosh, here it comes, right? And then, of course not, right? And then,
I do have to say I felt a little bad for you there. I was like, he was so close.
but I felt worse for Max because
Oh, I
I
know.
could not believe I'm sitting there reading, and Max takes that bullet. I said, no, 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 he didn't do this. No.
Right. See,
He-
that's what I mean. Like you're like shouting at the screen at the book because you're like, no, that wasn't supposed to happen.
No. When Scott's sitting there and says, do it, pull the trigger. You're like, no,
No, Scott, don't do it.
no. You're like so involved with what is going on. You feel like if this really happens, a part of you is dying because you're part of this. You are drawn into the story. You are emotionally right in the middle. You feel like you're a part of these people. It's almost like you have your own bunk, and you look around, and Max is your friend, and it's amazing. It's amazing writing. It is
You become
look,
closer to each character so much more
you do.
in the way that he developed him, like with like you finally like they finally get Jaden just to, do something other than just be quiet and stoic. I'm so happy that he and Esther, like, that worked out so well. So well.
That scene
And
was very funny too.
oh, it was so cute. Cowgirls don't cry. They don't cry. I'm just gonna put that out there. But and
Okay.
even like that, to go from Esther telling Scott how she felt, and just like that scene, that was, I read, like my mouth fell open. And personally, I am glad that Scott reamed her out, because I guess that's just like the reaction that I would have had. But just I've had a problem with Esther ever since she did that. Like that wasn't her decision. That wasn't her call to make. That wasn't her kill to take. Just and then to go, even after he shreds her, like he just takes her heart out and he just like stomps on it. You still, like, I mean, she became a raging, horrible, terrible tyrant, and she irritated me throughout the entire book. But at the same time, like, you felt so bad for her because it was just out of heartbreak. And what she did to Scott, she messed with him so bad about
Do you
Sveta and Nicole. I hated her. I
do you
hated
trust
her, but
her?
at the same time, I'm like,
Do you
do
trust her now?
I trust her now that she's gotten past it and she's accepted the fact that she doesn't even know why she felt that way she did about Scott. She just did. And I think she was just so impressed by everything that she heard he was, that she thought she was in love with him. And then when she really sat down and broke it down, she couldn't think of a single reason why.
Right.
And I trust her significantly more now. But just like through that entire book, like you really kind of hate her until
She's kind of unlikable in the book.
she really is, just because she's got this chip on her shoulder, because the only thing that she could think is pity me, pity me, pity me, because I was led on by some guy, even though she wasn't. But just at the same, like you hate her, and then you don't, because she breaks and she becomes human and she ends up with Jaden.
The only thing that would kind of just make me wonder about Esther is the conversation with Antipov. That is still, I mean, it's still
Yeah.
out there. It's still out there. It still makes you just kind of wonder. I thought that the drunk Esther scene was one of the funniest in the book. And when she talks about throwing Jaden on the bed and fixing him a mustard sandwich,
Yeah.
that was hilarious. That was just, you could totally hear that coming
Yeah.
from a person in her shoes. You could totally hear it happen. It was hilarious. I was laughing out loud, seriously laughing out loud. when I'm reading those scenes. I thought it was probably the funniest book in the series. It's also the most emotional book in the series. It was the best ending in the series. It's the best dialogue in the series. I mean, I could go on. This.
It really was good. And I you know what? I made another comment to Lee that I promised him I would put in the podcast because this made him laugh very hard. I have never ever been attracted to a character in a book before, but let me just tell you that whole scene when Scott went out on a date with Natalie and the way that he was looking and it's like I had to put the book down.
Wow.
Holy crap.
Well,
I had to walk away. Like I was like fanning myself. I'm like, whew.
Well, I kind of like Venus, so don't feel so bad.
I was like, oh, okay. I may or may not have lingered on that visual for a little while because I read and I'm like, I have to put this down.
Does your fiance know you have a crush on a fictional character?
I don't want to talk about it. The answer to that is no. And he's never gonna know because he won't let me read the book anymore. But
listen to this podcast.
I am totally jealous of Sveta. Not even gonna lie.
Wow. Wow.
I have a crush on Scott Remington. That happened. We're gonna move on and find something else to talk about now.
You'll never live this down, right?
Oh no. I understand.
Just no, you didn't. You really put yourself out there with that one.
I'm just saying, the girls listening to this, I'm gonna need you to stop this podcast and go back and read that part and tell me that I do not have a justifiable reason for saying what I just said. That's all I'm saying.
That is yes. I'm so glad you included that because I love hearing what you just said.
Anyway, moving on.
Yeah. All right. This was to be expected. We are jumping around, but as I said, it's when you finish this book.
We promise that the next few are going to be a little bit more concise, easier to follow. But I'm just trying to get everything that I'm thinking out right now because there's so many different things. Like all of the questions that you have had in the first 3 books, I don't want to say they get answered, but some of them get answered and then some of them don't get answered, which just brings up more questions. He develops so much, but he does hint at a focal point for the war. Right. And it really is mind-blowing to think that it's a holy war. Like that's really what it comes down to. And to think about all of like the things that he alluded to in the first 3 about the sudden attacks that didn't make any sense and why they weren't just taking Earth right out of the gate when they had all the reinforcements. Like he alluded to them trying to test our weaknesses to build them back up, to make us stronger. And to have him finally piece together those 4 words that he was given, it's amazing. It's like so many things start to click in your head and you go off on these thoughts all on your own. And then when he confirms them later in the book, like what you're thinking, it's, you want to know, like you want to know so much more. Like you're thirsty for more.
Oh yeah. Thirsty. That's a really good description of this book. I mean,
and I love he had Scott include his team in on what he was thinking, because you gain so much more perspective just from bouncing ideas off of other people.
Yeah. Man, It's okay. It's okay to bounce around though because this is a reaction podcast, and it's just finishing the book. You don't have much of a choice. There's so much. Like, do you find yourself in this book? I'll ask you this question: places where you're rooting for what you consider the bad guy. Do you find that in the book where you're rooting for the enemy?
I have never found myself rooting for Benjamin Archer.
Well, I mean, okay, the Backma. The Backma would be considered the enemy.
We'll put it this way. In this book, he does clarify who at least one enemy is, and all signs point to Benjamin Archer and that group.
Right. Maybe I should clarify myself again. When I say the enemy or the bad guy, I've never found myself rooting for Benjamin Archer. I particularly mean Tothan.
Oh yeah.
Or did you have any kind of sympathy for Thor at all?
If he wasn't doing to Scott what he was doing, then I would. But this is how conflicted I am about this. When they killed Thor, a part of me was like, well, it's about flipping time. But another part of me was very much, okay, now there's nobody to stop Archer. And what is going to happen to the 14th? What's going to happen to Scott? What's going to happen to David? What's going to happen to Dostoevsky? Like, you wonder, like, what's going to happen to all of that? Because even though he was that tyrant that kept them together until he sent 4 of them to Cairo.
As dislikable, which is a very gentle word to use for Thor, as he was as a character. When I'm reading what is happening to Ignatius Van Thor, I cannot help but think this is not supposed to be happening. This is not right. No, this is wrong. What's happening to him is wrong, and I find myself, I don't know, almost rooting for him because what's happening to him is entirely, it's venomous what's going on. And that's what I mean. Do you find yourself
There's so many levels of backstabbing in this from so many different places. Like he was trying to prove a point to Scott, I think, by sending him to Cairo and not sending the Eidolon. I think he was trying to prove a point. And Eden Command was trying to prove a point, or just try to take down their only, the only person that could bring them down. So it's an intricate web that each individual entity has weaved, whatever. And now it's all being torn down. So you're very conflicted. Like there was a point where I was, hoping that they were going to take Nova Sibirsk back, just for the fact of, it's not right that they're pinning it on Thor, and it's treason, like I said, of the highest caliber. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I can't exactly, be on Team Thor because he did what he did to Scott.
I know exactly why Thor sent Scott, and it really worked. It just didn't work like it didn't work out at the end like Thor wanted it to.
Right.
Thor wanted to send Scott to Cairo because, one, if the mission is a success, then everybody knows Scott is under Thor and he's doing what Thor wants and he's just betrayed Eden.
Right.
Scott's trapped. He can't run to Eden now. See, there's always that possibility that Scott somehow gets out of Novosibirsk and returns to Eden. But after this mission, if it's a success, that's not happening. After this mission, if it's a failure, that's not happening. The whole idea that Scott was being sent to Cairo was to trap him and to make him totally reliant upon Thor and not be able to go to Eden anymore. And that happened. That happened. It's just that Thor didn't see his end coming. But what has happened to Scott, we now understand what Outlaw Trigger means, because all of these events have culminated into what we just read at the end of this book. And I love the fact that we really understand what Outlaw Trigger means now, because you won't truly understand that until you read the end of this book. And all of these events that have happened even back into Dawn of Destiny, one thing has led to another. Where it may seem like something small, it has all led up to this turning point in the series, of which I have no idea how they're getting out of this.
Oh yeah, this is
no idea.
Like I said, they're the only saving grace they have at this point is that small handful of operatives, and even then, that may not be enough. I'm certain it's not going to be enough. Not only that, but the 14th is all over the place.
Yeah.
You've got some of them still at Novosibirsk, and one of them is a Nightman with a big flippin' target on him because he's a Nightman. You've got some of them in an alien spaceship headed for wherever. Sveta. For the record, though, I don't think that she is going to be in harm's way at all.
No, I don't think so either.
I think between Wu Teal and Tothan, she's going to be just fine. And I have no doubts that at some point they're going to, because I think what Tothan is going to end up trying to do is to find Remy. I think that their saving grace is either going to be this handful of operatives or to work with Tothan. Because at this point, like I said, they're all over the place. Like, how are they even going to reunite the 14th?
Maybe,
it's a hot mess.
Maybe we're beginning to get a glimpse, maybe, that the resolution to all this conflict is not going to just involve a few group of humans. It's going to take a conjoined effort from the humans, from the Golothok, from some of the Bachma, from some of the Athene. And this is one thing I love about this book, is because now you have an Athene that you're rooting for.
Yeah.
You have
a Golothok that you're kind of hoping is going to pull through.
I love this character. I love Centurion.
I
love the character.
He
so
is.
Much.
Because he's so driven to finish his mission. Like, that's his only purpose in life. That's the only thing that he wants to do. And it's drawing back to that, blurring the lines. His almost chivalrous notion of protecting the two females that he's with. One of them is an alien species that is not his, and the other is a human. So it's just, it goes back to that character development. Centurion is an awesome character.
He's my favorite new character in The Glorious Becoming, which he's not new, and you see him in Hero, but you really get to know him in The Glorious Becoming. I
love the different dimensions that we're finding out about Scott. Like, it just, how, like, the steps that he's willing to go, like how far he is being pushed. And I thought that it was a huge turning point for him to put Nicole's picture away.
Oh, yes. And that writing
was,
right there was brilliant too, because the language that Lee used is he buried her. I mean, that was brilliant writing. I'll tell you another stroke of genius. At the end of the book, or the last 100 pages or so, you have these different scenes. You have what's going on in Cairo what's going on in Novosibirsk predominantly. And you have this scene with Centurion and Esther riding Centurion's back, and Esther, the Golothok, protecting Esther, one of the 14th. And at the same time, in Novosibirsk, you have Tothan, a Bachman, protecting Sveta. That's brilliant, because it's happening at the same time. It's two different alien species, and these species are at war with each other. And yet you see a glimpse of something in Tothan and something in Centurion that it gives them sort of an equality there. I don't know if I'm wording that right. Maybe you understand what I'm saying.
I get where you're going with this.
It's genius.
It's a gratifying trait for both of them that they both share, and they don't even know it.
Right. And they're more real to you. And then it's part of the element that says, are they really bad guys? Are they? Really? Or are they more like us? I mean, look at
as he develops like the characters each in their own way, it becomes more and more apparent that they really aren't bad. They're pieces in a chess game being strategically moved by a higher power.
Right.
And neither of them have any control over it. Because now you have this rogue no-boat full of Bachma. Like, who knows what's going to happen with that. And you've got a rogue Athene and Golothok working with a handful of humans. Like, it's almost like they, just in the way that Scott is addressing Centurion, like he's not addressing him as a captive, like he's addressing him as part of the group now. And he's showing concern for him for being, as injured as he is. Mind you, he, is still like trying to use Centurion as a bargaining tool, but just it's like they even see that the lines are blurred.
Right. Right. And at the end of The Glorious Becoming, you realize the storyline here, the major storyline here, is that there's an alien war. There's so many subplots, but at the end of The Glorious Becoming, you see that the greatest enemy is not the alien. Not the aliens that they're fighting. Really, he's probably not the greatest enemy. I mean, you see Benjamin Archer as the greatest enemy. He's human. And can you really see much of a difference between the Bachma, what they do, and what some of the humans are doing? Can you see a whole lot of a difference between what Thor does and what Archer does?
It becomes all too clear, all too late in the game that Thor wasn't the enemy, or he just
right,
and that Benjamin Archer is 110% the real enemy behind all of this.
And yet we still don't know what this covenant he has with the Golothok is about. We still don't know. But the question, do the ends justify the means, comes up so much in this book. And I think most of us would say the ends do not justify the means. They don't. But then here's the question, what about for God? Because let me ask you this. Would any of this be happening if Nicole hadn't died?
That's an excellent question.
If Nicole hadn't died, would anybody know what the truth is? Anybody that's willing to fight for it?
That's something that I guess we'll never know.
Because I think that.
I think that, you know what? I think that if Nicole hadn't died, I still think that we would be facing a similar situation, because if you recall, Nicole's death happened after Thor had noticed Scott. Like I think that, let me see if I can word this correctly. I think that something would have happened to spark the curiosity about the war. Something would have happened. But I don't think that it would have happened the way that it went down.
Yeah. If Scott's not a Nightman, Tothan's dead.
And if Scott's not a Nightman, then Halar's message doesn't get passed on.
Right. Scott doesn't get sent to Cairo. Centurion's not part of this. Just think about what's happening. I mean, and it really happens before Nicole dies, but these things get set in motion, and people would ask, Scott asked the question, why? Why, God, did you take Nicole? And then you look and you say, wait a minute.
If he hadn't have,
is
where
the
would we get?
I believe by the end of the series we're going to see that Nicole's death
Was necessary.
More good comes out of Nicole's death. More people survive because one person dies. And these are the types of questions that, like I said, we touched on earlier. Maybe we'll wrap it up here. That maybe there's not an answer to. Maybe there's not a right answer. Maybe we'll never know the answer to it. But, why do bad things happen?
Is there... I think you're onto something. I think the whole driving point behind a lot of what behind maybe everything that Lee's written so far is everything happens for a reason.
Right. We're seeing it played out. That everything that's happening, there's something else that's happening, and ultimately it's going to drive toward a resolution that may not have ever happened without those bad things happening. And it's about seeing the big picture maybe versus seeing things with a limited view in time. That's deep, but
that is kind of deep.
But
all right,
so yeah.
So our reaction as a pair, Lee, to The Glorious Becoming is, first of all, I would like to point out that he plugged in the name of the book, and that was genius. He plugged it in like in the actual book.
Yeah,
that was awesome. Just found out that. I think that as a pair, we can agree that this has been his best book ever.
Yes,
and I cannot wait to do more podcasts, talk more about everything that he has thrown at us. Hands down one of the best books I've ever even read.
That's what I said. This is one of the, and this would be, if people could read this, this is the stuff that classic works are made of. Seriously, the stuff that classic works are made of. This is the stuff that people would talk about for a very long time if they would read it.
Very much so. And Lee, we look forward to doing more podcasts about it. So,
and maybe we'll get Lee on here.
You know what? I think that would be a great idea. I think for our next one, we should get Lee on and talk to him about his work and go from there.
All right. Guys, send us your feedback. Tell us what you think about the book. Go to the forums. Get some discussion started on different topics. We'll be looking at the forums and topics you might want to talk about in the book. Let's get the conversation started. It's going to be very fun to talk about this book for a long time.
It really is. And if you guys, again, if you want to get in touch with us, make sure that you email us. I believe mine is Stephanie@epicuniverse.com.
And mine is Derek@epicuniverse.com. That's DEREK.
And mine's Stephanie, SGEPHANIE @epicuniverse.com. Hit us up. Tell us what you think. We will definitely bring up what you have to say. We look forward to hearing your thoughts and to keep talking about this and keeping this going. Great job, Lee. It was fantastic.
Absolutely. Until next time, guys.
Peace out.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Epic Universe Podcast. To catch the latest word on Epic, join the community at www.epicuniverse.com.